The Labor Department has just released its latest report on inflation. The Consumer Price Index rose 8.3% last month. That's higher than expected, but a slight decrease from March. Analysts say it's a sign inflation could finally be peaking. The inflation rate not only affects how much we pay for everyday goods, it can also raise the risk of a recession if it stays high for too long. And now President Biden is calling inflation the #1 problem facing families today and his top domestic priority. Let's bring in ABC News financial contributor Alexis Christoforous along with ABC's Alex Presha in Washington for more on this. Alexis, does this mean the price increases that we've been seeing may finally ease?
I hope so, but I think it's just too early to say whether or not this is a trend. True that consumer prices did fall for the first time in 8 months, but they fell a lot less than expected. This is a very, very modest reprieve. And I think overall, this report shows us that high inflation will persist for a longer amount of time and keep the Federal Reserve on that path of aggressive interest rate hikes to combat this high inflation.
And how do they get these numbers? What prices do they focus on?
They look at goods and services that you and I and all of us spend on every day. And in fact, we took a deeper look inside this report just to see what those prices are for all of us. And it's not very pretty. Food prices up 0.9% last month, up nearly 9.5% year over year. Now, gas was actually down more than 6%, but that may prove to be just a temporary reprieve because as we've been talking about, gas prices have since rebounded to a record high. Rent, by the way, makes up a third of that overall consumer price index, up 0.5% for the third straight month. And, you know, we're all spending now. We're going out on experiences and traveling. So hotel stays up 1.7%. And look at that. Airfares up 18.6%. Those airlines passing along higher fuel costs to all of us. Also, new cars up 1.1%. That's the highest so far this year. I guess a little bright spot, used car sales were down. Prices were down about 0.4%. But you'd be hard pressed to have a consumer say they felt that.
Yeah, all right. So, Alex, President Biden is trying to defend his administration's actions to fight inflation. He's trying to also place the blame on this pandemic, the war in Ukraine, things that have nothing to do with the White House. But the latest ABC News and Washington Post poll shows 68% of Americans disapprove of his handling of the economy. So how vulnerable are Democrats on this issue with the midterms right around the corner?
Well, Diane, I mean, I think they're very vulnerable, right? And I mean, this is a season where the Democrats were expecting losses, specifically in the House and possibly in the Senate already. And then you have the economy and these new poll numbers. But listen, I mean, the president is saying that it's heartening to see with these latest numbers that the annual inflation has moderated since April. It's not quite as bad as that 4-decade high. But I mean, this is something that's still very much a concern, not just for Americans, but obviously for the administration. I mean, you brought up those stats. Data from earlier this month shows that more than 9 in 10 Americans say they are concerned at minimum about the rate of inflation. And so, yes, I mean, we were talking a lot about abortion in recent weeks, but this issue of the economy is going to continue to be a driver going into these midterms.
And Alexis, it always is when you're talking about politics. People look at, you know, the basics of what's happening in their home first, and this is certainly something that hits home. How does this all factor into what's happening with Americans' paychecks?
It's all about pocketbook economics. I mean, I think President Biden's talking about that all the time. And I think the long and short of it is your paycheck is not going much further, given the numbers today. I mean, we've been seeing wages increase. That's a good thing. But we're in an environment of higher interest rates, high inflation, and those wages are not keeping up with inflation. I think you're going to continue to see businesses, because we're also in the middle of a labor shortage, they're going to have to offer competitive pay. But in order to do that, they're going to raise prices on consumers. It becomes this vicious sort of cycle of growing inflation.
And Alex, the Senate, meanwhile, is set to hold a test vote today on a bill that would protect abortion access nationwide in the event that the Supreme Court does overturn Roe v. Wade. But that vote, I mean, it's all but certain to fail. So why are Democrats moving ahead with this anyway?
Diane, it's symbolic. I mean, that is the point here. They know that they don't have the votes. There are 2 Republican senators who are actually for abortion rights, Senator Collins and Murkowski. But even they are saying that this bill that's being voted on now is too broad and they won't support it. So it is doomed to fail. But for Democrats, the rationale here is they want a record. And we talked about certainly the economy is going to be something that's talked about going into the midterm election. Well, this now is going to be front and center for a lot of campaigning, especially in some of those swing states. And to have a record of each senator either voting for or against on this particular piece of legislation, I think is going to be a rallying cry, or they assume that it's going to be a rallying cry going into the summer and into the midterm.
And Alexis, one last point on the economy. When you try to factor in everything that's causing this inflation, what is left for either the White House or lawmakers to do to try to fix it?
Very little. I think, some are pushing for a national gas tax holiday. That's one thing that the president can do. We're seeing states sort of take that on themselves. But in terms of bringing down food prices, I mean, what are you going to do? Send out another stimulus check? That was part of the problem with inflation, is that we had pumped so much stimulus, so much government spending into the economy that it caused prices to move up.
All right. Alexis Christoforous, Alex Presha, thank you both.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.